Enna Reittort, welcome to Three Brothers Quest.
I'm so glad to be invited into the Three Brothers Quest.
All the way
This
from
was,
Thailand.
yeah, it just so happens that, yeah, Thailand has me wedded to its magnificent great trees. And, right now it's the monsoon season and the froggies are croaking and it's great.
Mm. You've just described my home in Vermont, froggies, monsoons, and trees, but I imagine Thailand is even more stunning. Thank you for writing this book, Broody Blue, a handbook of ruthless gentleness for the natural human mystic. Natural human mystic. Anna, what what does that phrase mean? Natural human mystic.
Well, first of all, what is a mystic? A mystic basically is uh, a human, you might say also, an animal that has this natural feel for what is beyond what our senses can feel in the immediacy of physicality. And well, since we've just been talking about trees and things like that, well, there is that sense of something there that is beyond the physical and that is part and parcel of us. And so my certainty is that humans are naturally mystics. And we have been, let's say, divorced from that natural sense by loads of stuff. We could spend the whole next hour going through all the stuff that has divorced us from that natural connection that we have. It's just more than a connection. It's the essence of everything is right here in us. So yeah, the natural human mystic is it's what encompasses and what inhabits this physicality, and which orients, dictates, nudges whatever it is that this physicality is here to do.
Mhm.
And and because it's natural, it doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to mean that you have to torture yourself, on the meditation cushion for 10 years or 20 years before you have that, aha realization that is, beyond words. Um, so for us Westerners, I think it's a difficult concept to grasp unless we already feel that sense that we are already naturally mystics.
Mm. How did you find your way to this notion, Anna? It's so beautiful, natural human mystic, and such a beautiful description there.
I didn't particularly, did I search? Like like all kids, there were those mystical moments. And, I could see that people around me were not having them. And so I stayed quiet. Um, anyway, I wasn't like everybody else. I was a misfit. And okay, that's the way I am. And that's anyway. But, as I grew older, well, I naturally sort of veered. I studied music and I naturally veered towards medieval chant and the sound of the human voice in the stone churches of Europe. And that was not enough because the oral tradition of that had been lost in Europe. And so I started going to the East and worked with people who were rediscovering their own stuff in Russia. And then one day I landed in India, which was the very last place in the world where I wanted to be. And and I was basically catapulted into this grassroots esoteric tradition of mainly illiterate people. And that's where the quest began. But then, I had to leave India, and it continued percolating beyond my awareness, my consciousness, as I settled here in Thailand and, became an apprentice peasant. And then it's really the communication or the communion with nature that suddenly made it all come alive.
Mm.
And then, the writing of the other book that we may talk about some other time, which took me through an absolute ordeal of what humankind has been through. But having been through that ordeal, having digested all that, intellectually, but also emotionally and at, deep levels, past lives, what have you, I understand that somehow a gateway was open whereby I could now be receptive to stuff from the subtle side of everything. And so that's how this book came about. I explained somewhere at the beginning of the book that one day, I'm sitting doing my usual sort of meditation routine, and there's this sense of be breathed, and it's gruff. And, because I'm already in the meditative state, I'm in no position to argue. It just it was so obvious. Well, yes, of course.
Mm.
And it never, and it stayed day after day after day after day. And the different the bits and pieces of how it breathes us just happened to me. And then 6 months later, the same gruff person, entity, spirit said, write about it. And I really disagreed very strongly. I was like, I've only been being breathed for 6 months. How the hell can I write a book? I'm not a master. Precisely. And that's when I discovered that the other part of being a natural human mystic is that you're forever a beginner, and it is so delightful. You never become a master unless you are a master of being a beginner.
The other book, real quickly, is called Krivda, The God Tricks Against the Matrix. And we'll perhaps tease our audience a little bit towards the end of our conversation here about that book in brief, but really do want to focus on, as we are here on Broody Blue. I love your description of breathe. Your voice was so good. For some reason, I've read Broody Blue a few times, and you mentioned this, but for some reason, for whatever reason in my head, I had sort of a more high, tinkling, melodious voice in my head. But I love the way you did that. So you proceeded then to write this book based on this exhortation.
Based on the experience that I had of
Mm.
being breathed, and day after day, it became more and more subtle, more and more precise.
Mm.
The different small gestures that I mention in the book, which are helpful to maintain, because a lot of people, when I just tell them, well, actually, are you actually breathing? Are you doing the breathing? No, I am being breathed. So they have this aha moment, which is greatly exhilarating. But if people do not cultivate it a tiny bit every day, it does not
Mm.
open up our receptivity to the myriad things that the world wants to convey to us.
Mm.
And so, there are these little bits and pieces, the fingers, the this, that, and the other, the eyes, really important, the unfocused eyes, these little physical details, which help in actually cultivating, but in a non-doing way. It's not me doing the breathing, I'm being breathed. So these bits and pieces got together, and it naturally came to me also that I had to command it to breathe me. It wasn't just me being passively breathed. There is my participation, and that is the great mystery. That's the great mystery about what it is to be a human being, as opposed to being, I don't know, a cat or a whale or a chimpanzee.
Mm.
And so, um, Yeah, the other thing is the voice that you mentioned. That voice, it felt like it came from way, way underneath. And so I double checked and I triple checked day after day after day. And it was the being of, whom we call Mother Earth, which, that was mind blowing. But since this was confirmed to me every day, every day, every day, and since then, I've developed a habit of, pretty intense conversations with the one I call the big lady downstairs, affectionately. Yeah, I mean, we know it has been sort of demonstrated that our planet has sentience and has a kind of consciousness. If we can climb out of our intellectual language, the language that we use in the mind, and if we can somehow feel, speak through a different place, speak through the heart without thinking the words, then there is a channel of communication. There is what I call an inner translator in the natural human mystic that can operate this two-way translation between the subtle language of animals, plants, the planet, the sun, what have you, and what we have, which is the human language that is processed through our vocal cords and our mouth. And being able to have that inner translator and to be able to rely on it is, well, it's much more natural to pre-literate people. They, I mean, they don't use language like us at all, and it's much closer to the fundamental vibrational nature of language. And so, having these conversations with beings of nature with that vibrational feel, it's never completely devoid of the language that that forms and informs our thinking patterns, but at the same time we can actually distill it to I'm not going to say lower, a subtler vibrational level, so to speak, and that is the language that all those other creatures understand.
The three brothers, the Baldwins, who support our podcast here, are all fond of Leonard Schlehn's work, particularly his book, The Alphabet and the Goddess. I don't know if you
I
know
don't
that.
know that one. I'm gonna have to explore that.
Yeah, The Alphabet and the Goddess. But you described it so beautifully that modern language, in some ways, is our own worst enemy.
Yeah.
Because it traps us up here
Yeah.
rather than, as you just said, this heart focused language that is resonant and in, let's say, in frequency with.
Yeah. And our language has become very flat and utilitarian.
Mm,
Why do people have to use swear words so much? Because, the and especially English, by virtue of having become the dominant language that everybody has to speak around the whole world, has become much impoverished.
mm,
And, the poetry, it's way more difficult to do poetry today than it used to be 200 years ago. So, and there is that deep vibrational relationship with, when you feel that deep vibrational relationship, you immediately sniff out words that are suspect, words that have been tampered with in terms of their meanings, or in terms of how they've been appropriated to not say what they really say. We're surrounded by that language all the time, and people are constantly trapped, including and particularly in this, in the spiritual circles. So, yeah, and we tend to go for buzzwords and sort of shortcut words, that are supposed to encompass a whole paradigm, but people no longer think of the paradigm that is, I mean, it's so complicated. But when one can be at that sort of, more fundamental vibrational level, it becomes restful. That language level is restful, and it's highly informative, and it enables us to convey to the living world around us how much we love it, how much we respect it, and it responds. It responds to us. And we've lost that, in many ways.
Yes. Can you describe for us, if you're comfortable doing this, Anna, kind of what your daily practice, the flow of that, this being breathed and opening yourself up to, just in brief, because you do it so well here, but just to give our listeners and viewers a flavor for what you mean when you describe being breathed.
Well, I mean, for me now, it happens just instantaneously. I sit, and as I mentioned in the book, it's a good idea to you first install yourself into the attitude of being breathed. And I call it an attitude, not a practice, precisely because it's of the non-doing variety, which is once again so very difficult for result-oriented Westerners who have to be doing, non-doing. You mean you're going to achieve whatever enlightenment and wisdom by doing nothing? It's not doing nothing exactly. It's non-doing. But anyway, so to establish that there has to be a kind of framework for the human being to get into that state, which involves simply having a rhythm. And instead of using 1, 2, 3, 4, it is much better there again to use the fundamental vibrational aspects that are intrinsic to each one of us, and to the first 1 or 2 syllables that will pop up from the subconscious, those are the syllables that you can use to give that basic sort of regular thing, because otherwise you're going to be all over the place. And so it doesn't take very much practice for those 1 or 2 syllables to you're just repeating them internally without pronouncing them out loud, without actually pronouncing them internally, feeling them. Feeling, there's the texture of the consonants and the texture of the vowels. So I think in the book I say gata, 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 whatever it can be. And each one of us is going to come up with different syllables, and they may change over time. So there's nothing fixed about this. The main thing is to get this thing going. Now, so when I sit and, okay, I start with my syllables, which I mean, they are the equivalent of a seed mantra. And so they're running, they run automatically, because that's just the nature of a seed mantra. Once you've practiced it, for not very long, it will run automatically. And then in the subtlest possible way, I place the words, breathe me. Initially, when I started, I just spontaneously knew that I had to say to whoever it is or whatever it was that was breathing me, I somehow knew that I had to tell it, breathe me, as a way of my agreeing to being breathed, of inviting it to breathe me, of being in interaction with it, whatever it was. So, I would place the breathe me, I would sort of send it to the space in front of me, or I would put it in different parts of my body, until it just struck me that, no, that place is just behind your back. It nearly touches your back, but it's along the spine, which is that vector for the cerebrospinal fluid. So there is a slight physical connection
Mm.
because of the cerebrospinal fluid, but it's just outside the spine, and it can be touching the spine. And there is just this presence there, which, I mean, I can't find a better word for it than spirit, because spirit is respirations, spiritus. It's the breath. And the minute I sit down now and I start with the mantra, and I place this, it's hardly even verbal by now. It's a very, very subtle sense of commanding it respectfully and kindly. And I mean, it's not a gruff command, commanding it to breathe me.
Mm.
And immediately the body falls into the meditative attitude, stillness. The body is erect without any tension, the right balance, not too much forward, not too much backward. Instantaneously, the body falls into that uh, the correct attitude of being in the contemplative state. And then, well, it just continues. And as the book explains, once that particular stage is comfortable, then it is going to invite the same on the broader scale of one's field.
Mm. One's field. Define what you mean by that.
Well, it's not, it's way more subtle than, our now well recognized electromagnetic field, the field of the heart. It could be the field of the heart, but way beyond what, Heart Math Institute shows. It today, I mean, actually, something must have been churning inside me in preparation for this conversation. The field that I felt to be my field extended to all over the earth. It was the first time this had happened to me. And it occurred to me that if more humans, or all humans, could inhabit their whole field like that, can you imagine what this world would be like? Wow. So,
I'm glad you
um,
I'm glad you clarified that for me. And coherence. So I've been a teacher of breath work, let's say, for many years myself. And one of the reasons I'm so taken with Broody Blue, I think, is because you're identifying a respiratory, let's say, respiratory path that seems to be very old, that hasn't really resurfaced as far as I've seen. And I think I probably read every Western English language book on breath I could get my hands on. But you're up to something a little different in Broody Blue.
yeah,
And
but it's all in the doingness
yes.
paradigm. Okay. This is the Western thing. Whereas I've been living amongst Asian peasants for the past 25 years plus. They don't do breath work, but they don't need to. They will fall into the attitude without thinking of it, without knowing that they're falling into the attitude. And the other thing is, as I mentioned in the book, I watch cats and broody hens. um what we call meditation, or that I prefer to call contemplation, is natural to every living being, from the blade of grass to us, hyper complex creatures. So, but we are so obsessed with the culture of doing this, achieving, getting there. Whereas in fact, I mean, I want to get to enlightenment. but you're already naturally enlightened, provided you let yourself be there, right?
Yes. Yes.
So it's, but but you can't get to that point. Either you're going to get to that point after 40 years of sitting on a what are they called, zafuton, um,
Yeah.
in who has time for that nowadays? When in fact, it's already all there.
Mm.
It's already all there, and it oh, it's so it's yeah, I feel so sad
Mm.
for this conditioning that we have in the West, and that we are instilling to the rest of the world, the third world. If you Now that they've all realized that, it's not a good idea to be a poor person, and to just, enjoy, a coconut here and a mango there, and you could get by perfectly fine, and you could spend all your time, having conversations with flowers and butterflies. Um, that's being changed the world over.
Mm.
But, you know, Westerners, Westerners, a large number of us has actually reached the end of how far we can go without doing this. And it's like, the very, very great scientists in high physics, eventually they reach that border beyond which they can only become mystics. That's
Right.
the only way through.
Yeah.
So, it may be happening without being great physicists. It may be happening to, many more of us, that we need to go back to who we are naturally.
Yeah. It feels like the human species and is at a crossroads. I agree. Um, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Wendell Berry, the great Kentucky poet, environmentalist. He has
Yeah, yeah.
he wrote a little book, a critique of Harvard University entomologist E.O. Wilson's book Consilience 20 years ago, called "Life is a Miracle," an essay against modern superstition. And by
Mm-hmm.
modern superstition, what Wendell Berry meant was science.
Mm-hmm.
Because E.O. Wilson proposes in Consilience that science should be the unifying framework, let's say, for all human knowledge. And in this, and I remember running across this sentence, and it, like a doves descending from heaven. I foresee a time, Berry said, in the near future where humans must choose between living as creatures or living as machines. And you use
Yeah.
the word animal at the very beginning of our conversation here, the human animal. And it reminded me of Barry's notion that we are creatures, that we are part of this organic, living, breathing creation, and in flow with this living planet all day, every day. And we're so in the West, it seems, even unaware of
Mm.
that reciprocal flow. Wu Hui in the Taoist tradition, I think you referenced this perhaps in Krivda, this idea of effortless effort or non-doing, as you say here, is so beautiful and so alien to to so many here in the West.
But the Japanese, in the book, the most, I mean, the thing that works the most for
Mm.
the greatest number of readers of the book is the Japanese. It's not the Tao thing. It's the Japanese. It's a Japanese, I mean, non-school of non-practice, where basically there are three extremely simple exercises that you do, and then you just let your body take over, and your body starts to move. And people have healed, or it has healed, all sorts of stuff. Um, and it's actually the real essence of true martial arts.
Mm.
It's this, it's that 0 point thing.
Mm. Can you briefly, if it's not too much trouble, Anna, can you briefly describe those three exercises? We talked a little bit about involuntary movement as part of that, but could you paint us a picture?
Um, I don't do the exercises anymore because now, if I want to go into that, so they're just, one of them has to do with um, twisting your torso along with the breath. Uh,
Yeah.
I've forgotten.
That's
I
okay.
for,
People
I
can read them
forgot.
in the
I
book.
because you know I don't need to do them anymore.
Yes. Yeah.
There's another. The body also becomes much more sensitive to, well, especially the environment. In nature. Uh, I visit a particular couple of trees every day,
Mm.
and they they impart to me the vortex movement of energy that rises up from Earth in the morning, and the vortex movement of energy that comes from above towards, starting more or less mid-afternoon. Um, so, it's just so, it's only a matter of opening up one's ability to feel, to be receptive to what is there. Um, but I'm well aware that, we Westerners, we to be able to undo the conditionings it's no mean feat. And I can understand why people have needed to, go to Eastern countries and to go and spend 20 years in a Zen monastery. But we don't have time for that anymore. We are, the stuff that we are being subjected to, the intensity of it, the intentionality of it is such that we need shortcuts now. And so, that's the other aspect why the big lady downstairs, when she said, write the book, it was, and I was protesting violently.
Yes.
Um, but I understand now why I had by being in the non-doing attitude every day, you know, after about 1 year, I had forgotten how it came to me and the different stages that came to me. Okay. So there was that pedagogical, you're not going to keep it for yourself. This you have to share with others. The great difficulty of writing that book was, how do you put across the mystical when you're not going to be writing, the inspired poetry of a 12th century Sufi? Because that poetry is greatly inspiring, but does it put you in that state? No, it comes through the creativity of that particular poetic person. Whereas here, this is why I just call it a handbook.
Yes, I was just thinking
It,
that. Yeah, this is a handbook.
it's only a handbook.
Yeah, yeah. So wonderfully said, and it's helping me understand how you came to write the book. It really, it sounds like you were really given no choice.
None of the books, the previous book, I had no choice, and the
Yeah,
one I'm doing now, I have no choice. I mean, I have no choice. I already know the ones that gonna have to do afterwards. I have
yeah,
no choice,
yeah.
just by virtue of the specific sort of life experiences that I've had. And I look around and I read other people's books and I think, oh God, how come I'm seeing this and they're not? So okay, I'm gonna have to do it. But with uh with this one, it's really, really, I rewrote every paragraph 8, 9, 10 times.
Mm,
It was, trying to keep a linear language as close to the actual experience, and at the same time, using, I don't particularly like the English language. So yeah, it was, but that's the whole business of translating, it's that actually having to rewrite every single paragraph was ultimately a very good exercise in trying to be as close as could possibly be with the human language to what was underneath.
Mm. What language would you have written this book in if you had your blue sky?
Russian.
Russian. I was going to guess, yeah, either an Eastern European language or Russian. Yeah. Before we leave the title of the book, a handbook for ruthless gentleness. That's such an interesting, I think many would say oxymoron. Ruthless gentleness. What do you mean by that?
Well, there again, for people who know about koan and things like that, any true mystical insight
Yeah.
it does, tend to use opposites or whatever,
Mm,
oxymorons, as you say. Being breathed is utterly gentle.
mm, mm,
It's utterly gentle. But as I said, that initial aha moment when you feel that you're being breathed, you need to be ruthless with yourself to put yourself in that attitude every day for 3 to 5 minutes.
mm,
3 to 5 minutes is not much, it's gentle, but you have to be ruthless with yourself to do it every day,
mm.
to do the non-doing every day.
Yeah.
And that's the condition for it to become a second nature that you can invoke in any life situation also.
Mm,
When you're in the middle of a crisis, you know,
mm.
just that little fellow at the back, breathe me.
Yes.
It's extraordinary what it does. So yeah, uh, and so okay, the ruthless gentleness for the natural human mystic who is probably still sleeping inside you and waiting for you to be ruthlessly gentle with it.
Yes, I love that. Yeah. And I know people are curious. The three brothers were, and you describe this in the book, but just give us a teaser. Why Broody Blue? What's up with that?
Well, I mean, normally people would say, oh, it's the broodiness of feeling the blues. Well, exactly the same thing as with the other book. It's the God tricks against the Matrix. Everybody thinks it's God who is saving us from the Matrix. It's exactly the bloody opposite. So broody is, well, as I say in the book, hello, here is one of the teachers of
Oh,
the
yes,
book.
you and I share an affinity for the felines. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you will have noticed that felines naturally fall into this attitude of doing nothing, of being non-doing.
Show the back
Exactly.
of the book with this beautiful feline, which you write about. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but it's even more striking in hens who are sitting on their eggs.
Hens,
For
chickens.
hens,
Yeah.
chickens, well, other
Mm.
feathered creatures also.
Yeah.
They're going to sit on those eggs, hardly moving, for 3 weeks. Once in a while, perhaps once a week, twice a week, they'll come down in a rush, in a very urgent rush to put some food in their bellies and go right back as if, okay, I just took a toilet break, in between two 24-hour sessions on the cushion. And they sit there completely focused on nothing at all, or perhaps focused on something. What do I know? But those 3 weeks,
Mm.
and they fall into the stillness of the meditator. I mean, I mean, I had always tried all sorts of meditation techniques and things. Never worked for me. Found them boring. Found them, and they constantly wanted me to discipline my body. I felt an itch. I felt, this, that, and the other. My legs were hurting like crazy. Just ignore it, and it'll pass. Um, with this thing of being breathed, there's no more problem. It just happens naturally, exactly as it happens for cats and for hens. And so by observing these animals, I realized, well, okay, these are the most accessible meditation masters one can possibly have. I don't need to go to a remote Zen monastery. I've got it right here under my very nose. And so Broody is what the hen is when she's sitting. She has this heat, which is also another mystical characteristic.
Yes. What do you mean
So
by
the hen is Broody, and the end of the book
uh,
is a practical example of a Broody plant, which produces the color blue. And the whole technology in traditional Japan precisely revolves around whatever mystical things happen in the indigo vat and the ways in which the artisans who've been doing this intergenerationally for who knows how long, the way they know how to not do anything is quite amazing. Any, any, you know, untimely doingness of a split second is going to spoil the indigo vat. It is the most mystical color, and it's the most mystical plant in its sort of metamorphosis on its way to becoming a dye. So that's how Broody Blue came about, and it's not at all the blues, and it's not at all the broodiness.
yes, when I got to that part in your book about the hens, I used to raise little hens myself, and I was like, of course, I see it now. So beautiful. Well, gosh, we could talk for hours. Can you? I hope we can do this again soon, Enna. Um, can you maybe give us a little bit of a teaser about this? I believe you wrote this book before Broody Blue.
Yep.
Krivda, the God trick.
Krivda,
Kriv,
Krivda with a rolled R.
Krivda,
Yeah.
God tricks against the Matrix. And I would say, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a much more ambitious book for the reader, um, because
Depends.
well, how would you describe Krivda versus Broody Blue? Give us a teaser for our next conversation.
Broody Blue comes out. It's the continuation, basically. I mean, Krivda was. I'm academically trained. Having done 3 academic books way back when, I swore to myself that never again. I was never again going to write. I'm a barefoot peasant out here. But then when COVID hit, I was talking to a friend, and we were talking about religions and gods. And I pointed out to him, yeah, but you're missing out the god of money. And he said, right, you have to write a book. And I said, no way. And the next day I started writing Krivda. So
Of course, once again. Uh,
yeah,
for,
well, when you know that you have to do it, because I saw, we were with the COVID thing, there was literally this sort of high priesthood of medicine and science. We know that science, you know, all that stuff. And then, you would have all sorts of people in the alternative media saying, yeah, this is behaving like a religion. But it bloody well is a religion. That's the whole point. And I went back to the origins of the Christian religion, which is the most powerful, has covered the whole globe, and it's the one with which I'm, the most familiar. And yeah, I had to do, there was some research involved, but all of this had already been marinating somewhere inside me for a long, long time already. And
no.
so, the books I needed, I already had
Mm.
from way back when, or I had ordered them just, on a whim. And if I didn't have them, I ordered them. and they would land in my lap precisely when I needed them, for the whole, for the linear succession of the argument of the book. But basically, it's about religion as a phenomenon that is, it's a distortion of the natural, subtle sense, spiritual sense, although I use the word spirituality with inverted commas also, that is intrinsic to us. We have a natural sense for the immanent and the transcendent. It is not, that's why, we're natural human mystics. And something had happened. It so happens that we can document it from the Old Testament, and probably the roots of that religion in the ancient sort of Anunnaki deities, which established a whole system of belief in a god with the necessary intermediaries between the gods and us, such that our natural relationship with the cosmic level of who we truly are, the subtle level, the all, the transcendent, etc., that has actually been stolen from us. And so it starts with religious religions. And so we have the whole story around Yahweh in the Old Testament. And, there are good translations now that are done by this man who's becoming increasingly famous outside Italy, Mauro Biglino, who has translated the official version that is now used of the Old Testament from Hebrew, where he shows very clearly that this fellow Yahweh is a brutal colonizer, looking very much like an ET and having ET kind of, vehicles and tools and things like that. And he demands human sacrifice, especially human sacrifice of small infants. And he wants them to be fully burnt, which is the actual meaning of Holocaust. Okay, so then we have a number of elements which are then going to morph into what becomes the New Testament, the Gospels, with a new story, a human sacrifice of Jesus that people are supposed to perpetuate along with the cannibalistic ritual of his flesh and his blood every time people go to a mass. And it morphs into, once after the Renaissance, there's the whole clash between religion and science. And science gradually displaces religion in that sense to become its own religion. And it has its own sub-branches. And they all operate, having analyzed the basic structure of all the ingredients that you find in the Christian religion, which is the most complete, coherent, complete set of ingredients. The religion of the money god, the religion of the science god, the religion of the medicine god, they all have exactly the same ingredients. The intermediary high priest class, all the lower clergy, the geographical, this, that, and the other, the language, the myth, the dogma, everything. Exactly the same thing. So that we are now living under the empire of a religion of money, a religion of science, a religion of medicine. And a lot of us are rebelling, of course. But moving into the techno religion, which it openly is a religion for its fans. The Yuval Hararis and the Weffers, and it is their religion.
By Weffers, you mean the World Economic Forum crowd, the Davos crowd, the Schwabians, although he's retiring apparently. Klaus,
Yeah, sure.
whatever.
And whoever it is that is behind them,
Yeah.
plus, the the fact that Yahweh is described as essentially an ET warlord points to the fact that, whatever it is that is running these religions is not exactly a human entity. It's
Yeah.
something else.
And just so our listeners and viewers are clear, by ET, you're referring to extraterrestrial, is that right?
Yeah.
An off-body being or off-planet.
Yeah, off planet, other civilizations, whatever it is. Or it could be just egregores. I haven't, other people have, I've already done a very good job of deciphering, those aspects. They can be interdimensionals, they can be all sorts of stuff. But basically, what is happening now with the technologization of everything and the way it is striving to take over everything in the living world of this planet.
Mm.
The micro, nano, femto, pico, whatever level. Well, it's telling us that there is something of a very subtle nature, of a very non-physical nature, that is using all those, white coat people in labs doing all sorts of weird shit with bits and pieces of genetic material and weird exotic metals and nano materials and what have you, trying to place little robots, inside everything. Yeah, it makes total sense to me. I mean, to me, it's self-evident that there is another intelligence out there that is orchestrating all this. And, the very rapid advance of all these very exotic high-tech things over the past couple of decades, which have been actually ongoing for longer than that. We're only finding out 40, 50 years later what has already been invented. How all of this should have occurred so suddenly when, prior to World War II or prior to, let's say, the atom bomb, you know, we weren't ready to develop nanomaterials. How come it all happens so very quickly?
Mm.
Huh?
Yeah, you're
Hmm.
referring
So
to,
to me, it's very clear that there is somebody out there.
yes, and we're talking about this phenomenon of transhumanism, is one way to think about it. For people who are wondering what we're talking about, search that term, transhumanism, if this is all sounds new to you. The term Krivda, could you describe, where did that come from? What does that mean? Krivda.
It's a Russian word.
Russian word.
Um, it's it's a word that is not used very much. And when one day I was talking to a Russian friend when I was beginning to write the book, and I was telling him about this, and he said, "Do you know the word krivda?" And I said, "No." I said, "No," but I felt like some kind of electric current up and down my spine as he pronounced the word, and I said, "Does it mean pravda gone crooked?" And he said, "Yeah." So people generally, pravda, okay, we remember from, communist Russia, Pravda was the main newspaper of the Russian Communist Party, and it means truth.
Mm.
And well, okay, there were a lot of communist non-truths embedded in the truth, but that's another story. But Pravda, basically, it goes back very, very, very far in the Russian worldview,
Mm.
and it denotes truth and justice as one thing.
Mm.
You don't need justice to reach truth. You don't need truth to reach justice. They both are the same, one and the same totality. And so, pravda, coming from the ancient cosmology of the Russians, is, let's say, what we would call the world of of spirituality.
Mm.
And there are two other worlds, a little bit like in, indigenous Native American or other cosmologies, where you've got, you've got those three worlds again: the nether world, this world, and the world of of the spirits. So the layer that is up there is prav, and pravda, da being like ty at the end of an English word, subtlety. So pravda is truth, justice.
Yes, I see.
And krivda is derived from that. Kriv means crooked. So most people in Russia will say it means lies. It's lies versus truth. But I think it is much more subtle than that. It is the deceit that is hidden amongst the truth. That's why, I mean, religion has flourished because it took the reality, the truth, and the justice of our own natural spirituality, and it plugged its own designs into it. Okay, so it's the making crooked of truth and justice.
Yes, or another way to say it, bringing it back to Broody Blue, is that our own uh, natural human mysticism was subverted.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly,
and
exactly. So,
bent
and
to the wheel.
so you've just said, having written that Krivda book about stuff that has gone crooked and
Yes.
how we've been sacrificed, we've been, milked for loosh and all this stuff. Um, and we're reaching the point where the gods are all coalescing to do the final great sacrifice for whatever their purposes are. And I finished the Krivda book with, you know, at least a preliminary affirmation that there is a different human path into which I had been initiated into a form of it by my grassroots mystics in India. And so, I could only cover a certain amount of that human stuff. There was a practical book, a handbook that needed to be written to, to bring it to
Uh,
complete the circle,
yes,
which
yes,
is why the two books have the same. I mean, the cover is the
yes,
same, just different elements.
yes. That, gosh, this really, you really bring it, but you really bring it home here for me, Anna, because I now see how these fit together. So beautiful. Well, gosh, I so appreciate this conversation. We must do it again soon. Tell our viewers and listeners how they can find you. You keep a fairly, I wouldn't say low profile out there. You're on the internet, the World Wide Web. I love those terms. Speaking of words and spellings and words that cast spells, the web, the net. Where do, where do people find you, if at all?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I don't. I'm perfectly incapable of doing social, what's it called, media,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
Social media.
whatever. I don't have time. I'm a peasant, which that takes a number of hours every day. Um, I also contemplate. I am working, on another book. Um, and I'll occasionally, when something sort of really strikes me as, okay, I need to write up something, I post something on my Substack page. That's my only other presence.
Thank you. You have a Substack, which is how I found you and reached out to you. I
Ah,
believe it's substack.com. It's Enna Retort. Is that what it
it's
is?
just Enna, Enna dot
And
Substack.
ENNA, Enna.
That's
Yes.
right.
And you have a website as well, or no?
Yeah, there's a tiny website which occasionally I'll, put up the latest podcast if I'm really behind, but I don't use it for blogging or anything. It's just, it's like a visiting card on the internet. That's the way,
Yes, I love that. I
that's
love
the
it.
way things have to be now. But, I'm not after a big following, the people who resonate with what I'm saying. And then, yeah, my only other presence on the internet is what is most important is these conversations with people who are curious, who have that, the kind of curiosity that you have, and who also have, like what you are also revealing, Rob, you know, you also come from a pretty long way. You've also done, your own path, your own searching. So, you know, for me, way out here in Thailand, where, well, there aren't many of these conversations to be had. having these podcast encounters with people of a like mind or a partially like mind is well, it's a treat for me. And yeah, it makes it possible to perhaps elucidate things that don't come out, clearly enough in the books, or yeah, and that's my internet presence, and that's great.
Yes, well, Enna Reittort, the book is Broody Blue, a handbook of ruthless gentleness for the natural human mystic. Thank you so much for writing this. And we will talk again next time about your book, Krivda. I got to work on my.
Yay!
That's good, right? The God Tricks Against the Matrix. Thank you for taking the time out of your evening in Thailand after your day of peasant duties as you describe them. And I want to talk more with you about that next time to be with us. And special thanks to the Baldwin brothers, Michael and Ian and Philip Baldwin, and the Marion Institute for co-sponsoring this podcast. Anna, any last words of wisdom, exhortation for Team Human, as I like to refer to us as the tribe?
If our listeners could just not try to imagine, just feel into that notion that each one of us has a subtle field that circles around the whole earth. And if, just not even a large number of us, but if this small number of us felt, or perhaps not completely felt, because I mean it doesn't happen overnight, but held this notion that actually, yes, there's something about my heart field that reaches all around the earth, and that these few or many fields could all overlap, but each one of us with a central point in a different part of the world. How great would that be? I mean, it's when that hit me today, I just, oh, yeah. So, thank you for being the trigger for that, Rob.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to call it a revelation that you had today, Anna. That's astonishing, and I'm going to carry it with us from this conversation forward. Thank you so much.
But
Yeah,
Rob, another
yeah,
thing,
please.
the prelude for this kind of thing that comes, as this one came to me today, is the being breathed experience. Being breathed 3 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day, every day. It opens up so much. I mean, I didn't know when I was writing the book, I had no clue. But it just comes and comes and comes, and you start discovering that you can actually do stuff beyond what we think we can do. And I'm not going to say what it is now, because people are going to think I'm absolutely, completely batshit crazy.
We're going to save that for a next conversation.
Anyway, thank you very much, Rob. I'm very, very happy to have met you. Thank you for
And
inviting me. Thank you
thank you,
so
Anna,
much.
and we'll talk again soon. Welcome to the Three Brothers Quest. We are in the requesting room with Michael and Philip and Ian and myself, here to reflect on our conversation with Enna Reittort, the cultural linguist and peasant farmer, and the author of, among other books, Broody Blue. Gentlemen, welcome.
Good to be here. Good to be here.
Yes, good to have you. So, what did you make of Enna Reittort and Broody Blue?
Well, I was actually very fascinated by it because one of the things that I think the three of us or the four of us are so intrigued with is naturally the belief system of indigenous peoples. and the attitude that I think we've all been brainwashed into believing, which is that indigenous peoples are inferior. They're ignorant. They just scruff around to make an existence, and how can that be in any way equal to the kind of existence that we're all supposedly enjoying? And so what she, living in this sort of, I assume, with an indigenous group in Thailand, as she calls herself a peasant, is fascinating to me. That has sort of conjured up this belief that seems to come from Mother Earth, that the kind of religious practices that have been that we've all been trained to listen to and adhere to, and it is really totally unnecessary. The years and years of meditation, the preparatory stuff that you have to do, for instance, in Tibetan Buddhism, in order to get further teachings, like the Dzogchen teachings. And as a student of Tibetan Buddhism, with a practice that I'm completely hopeless about, I find what she has to recommend very alluring. And also, as she points out, one of the greatest problems here is around doer addiction, and the do of life, of which I am a quintessential example, is this staggering impediment towards a higher realization. And so to come up with this practice that is 3 to 5 minutes a day, versus what I personally am facing if I'm doing my Dzogchen practice, it's night and day. And so I just think it's extremely interesting, and I think it's also fascinating that her firm belief is that so many of these indigenous peoples naturally have this association with an ability to have a higher grasp of reality. So I think she's got a lot to say, and I'm challenged, to try it. It's pretty easy. And for me, 3 to 5 minutes a day, I might be able to carve it out.
Michael, am I right in remembering that last winter when we were gathered in Marion, you had actually been trying the breathe me, the being breathed approach? Am I remembering that correctly?
Well, yes, absolutely. But I haven't. It took me refreshing myself for this postquel, or whatever we call it, that I reread, I re-listened to the interview, which I think is terrific, and that brought me back to it. Whereas when you and I met, I was flirting and never carried through, and I hadn't finished the book. I hadn't finished the book.
Okay.
And I don't think breathe me is easy for us thoroughly industrialized folk. I think it's a serious effort. She does make it sound like it's extremely achievable, which it probably is if you're
if you
motivated and you have enough of a sense that it's important. Anyway, I think, yeah, I was very attracted to it too. And I think I reread the book, and I think it will do with a third reading, frankly, because it seems like it's simple, but it ain't simple.
Well, I don't know that I think it is, in a sense, simple. It's just that we automatically go to making it complicated. And the word effort, which you used, Ian, is, of course, a no-no as far as she's concerned. Don't make an effort. So for instance, the focus thing that she talks about, and I'll shut up because Philip needs to talk. The focus thing, I practice the focus thing. It's actually very easy to non-focus, at least I find. You just sort of look out there and you sort of shift a little bit and you're not really focused.
Yep.
Anyway, what has Philip got to say?
I've taken copious notes from her talk, and going over them, I see several that could be mentioned. Just a quick follow up to what you've been immediately saying about this or non-focus thing. Curiously enough, we're about to go off to an exhibition in France that we're invited guests for, in which the title of the exhibition is Unfocused.
Oh.
Came up with a triptych that tries to address this subject, which I will not bore you with, but it's a charming little synchronicity around the timing of reading the book. The other thing is about being unfocused. You know, I'm sure you have the same anxieties that I do. You write somebody what you think is an important letter, and you don't get a reply. And you think, oh my God, it must have gone into spam and everything. And sometimes you seek it out, you resend it and complain or whatever. But 99% of the time, if you don't do anything in a timely manner, you get the appropriate reply. Now, at an earlier age of my life, I would have been incapable of waiting for the appropriate reply. I would have had to hound the person. These days, I find I'm better able to wait. And it's linked up to what we're talking about here. I have to say, what's glaring out at me at the page was when she refers in the talk at about 51 minutes, I think, maybe a little sooner, that Yahweh is an ET warlord from a different civilization. And that's what I've always thought Yahweh was. So I was rather amused to be corroborated in that perspective. And then she goes on and says, it's clear that another intelligence is orchestrating all of this. Now, I don't know if I agree with that or not, but it's interesting that her whole story and what she says implies that. That, of course, is referencing the problem that we have, whereas her book, Broody Blues, is a book of solution. And that's an interesting element that I think we need to remind ourselves of. Why did we invite her onto our program of interviews? And in her case, she's addressing to some extent causes, but she's really addressing solutions.
Yeah.
What she has suggested is a way forward. Is it a realistic way forward for a civilization such as ours, the state we're in? We could talk about that.
Very good.
Okay. One of the interesting things that happened roughly where you're pointing, I think my notes have minute 53 into the interview you did, Rob. And you talk about, I think you choose that moment to talk about her earlier book, Krivda. And she makes the etymological note that kriv, well, the term is Russian. Kriv means crooked. And so Krivda is this deceit hidden in truth, which when we get to a future interviewee is going to be critical to wrestle with.
Yeah.
The other, that you touched on another broad theme, and it's nothing to really say except to observe that she makes a point of it more than once, which is that we are cosmic beings and Gaian beings. And her whole tradition, if you will, which springs actually from Japan, but it is, she lives in a peasant community. I think not in Thailand, but India, or is it Thailand?
Oh, to Thailand.
Doesn't
Right.
matter. It's a peasant community. And I remember traveling around the world 60 years ago and seeing an awful lot of people who could sit with their arses on their heels and just look.
I've always envied it.
And then carry on a conversation. Of course, none of us can do that.
Why didn't our mother teach us to sit on our heels? I would
But at any rate, that's the community she's living in. It hasn't learned. Of course, that's 60 years ago, so I may be full of shit. And
No, it's still true.
It's still true. All right. But at any rate, so you have these two sources of being. And I haven't ever thought of it that way. And more than once, she refers to someone else is at work in the background. And I would like to actually ask her, well, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
And then she herself grounds this business of breathe me and all the other things that come from that very much in almost instructions from Gaia, the earth god. S.
Yeah.
Pay heed to me is how her journey begins, with this connection with the Gaian voice.
It's easy, much easier to talk about than to experience. And she clearly has experienced what you've described in a very visceral way. And when she mimics the voice,
I know.
Right about it. I mean, wow. I wish that could happen to me if I got the right message.
You got to slow down a bit. Yeah. Anyway, I'm enough engaged by this book. It has subtlety that I'll do something I have never done. I'll do a third read.
Good. And probably Krivda, and maybe another interview.
Yes, to that.
Well,
Yeah.
at some point, I mean, the connection between actually several of the people we have interviewed and will be interviewing seem to gradually zero in on what looks to me like essentially the same subject. And as Ian pointed out earlier, some of our future interviews in the next months will be addressing basically these same subjects.
Yeah.
To pick up on that, Philip, I was writing notes as you were all sharing, and I was reminded in our conversation with Enna of Jeremy Lent and his idea, or his reminding us of the Eastern idea of in Taoism of Wu Hui, effortless effort, doing, non-doing, which I think Enna,
yes,
in her own words, yeah.
Wasn't the example wasn't the example about the indigo vat?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's such a beautiful metaphor.
Beautiful metaphor.
An actual practical application. It's very powerful.
Yeah.
Very.
Yeah. And we're referring, and she takes it to the Japanese, Philip, in Kyoto, right?
That's the indigo vats. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gary Luckman, creators of the cosmos, this notion that we're kind of collaborating work, it's a co-participatory universe, and to Ian, your point that like something's going on, we're in flow, dare I say, we're in partnership with the unseen. And in Broody Blue, she's giving us
well, these many traditions, and as Philip points out, many of our speakers can address these. For instance, Graham Hancock can address this. The idea that and this is buried in the indigenous traditions, or at least a great many of them, that we come from the cosmos, but we inhabit this specific planet. And there are two bodies in the Gnostic myths, as John Lash presents them. The Aeon Sophia is somehow connected to Gaia. And it's very fascinating stuff, and it takes us off subject, but she clearly herself is aware of all this.
Yeah.
And she gets deep into it in Krivda.
Yeah, so maybe we do all do Krivda and then do invite her to speak again.
Yeah.
I think from what we've all said today, I think that might be a good move.
Yeah. Good.
Any last thoughts, gentlemen?
Nope, not from me.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us in the requesting room. I look forward to our next couple of conversations. We're not even going to tease them here, but we're very excited. So stay tuned, everyone. Stay tuned.
All right.
Enjoy your week.
Yeah.
Yes.
You too.
We'll talk soon.
You
Let me
too.
know.